to start.
We got quite a bit of folks online, and we've got people here in the auditorium, so we'll get started. And so tonight we're going to be doing a lot of discussion about composition, and we're going to review the photos from the recent Yellowstone trip. So we've got photos from 8 different people who submitted some other photos while they were in Yellowstone this past winter. And we're, some of y'all may have remembered Chris Richmond is going to be the, she was a judge in some of our contests, but she's going to be kind of critiquing and pointing out compositional elements in each one of these photographs for us. And so we got quite a few photos to go through, so I'm just going to kick it off and turn it right over to Chris to get started. And if you have a question, shoot in the chat, and for anybody who's online, make sure you're on mute if you're going to be running your tequila blender. So, all right, I'll let Chris get started.
Okay, I'm going to be showing these because there were so many of them. I'm just going to use a photo viewer. So you may lose a tiny bit of resolution through Zoom, but you know, deal with it. That's all I can say. It's too many images to open them in Photoshop and go through them and close each one and open the next set, and just going to take so much time. So that's kind of what I plan on doing. I have taken the liberty of going through the images and looking and seeing if I think there are compositional changes that could be made and what the strengths of the images are. And then I actually made some of those changes to show you how I see it. Just remember, this is all subjective and it's all up to the maker to decide what to do. These are just some ways that I would look at them. So I did take the liberty of chopping up your images. So we'll see from there. I promise I won't save them. Okay. I'm going to start here. I have also decided to group the images in kind of categories. So all of the individual animals, and then all the groups of animals, and then, you know, the trees and things like that, because I don't want to say the same thing over and over and over again. So sometimes I can speak to like a whole group of images. And the group of individual animal images, I know when we go out, we don't have time to go over and meet the animal and say, now, could you lift your head a little here and a little there? So I do understand that these are all taken in the moment. And I do understand that we all have the tendency to put that animal right in the center of our viewfinder, because that's where we have our viewfinder set. And we don't want it, we're lazy and we want to get it really fast. So we don't really compose in the field. And if you're not going to compose your images in the field, then shoot wider than you need, because then you can compose in Photoshop and post-processing. So I'm going to start with the individual animals. And, you know, your images were great. They really give you a sense of place, most of these images, and the harshness of the winter and the snow that's falling. I mean, this, you know, the snow is whipping by this animal. But compositionally, when I come into an image like this, I come in and here's my center of interest, his poor, miserable face in the snow. Or maybe he's not miserable, but you know, the face in the snow, and I get there and then I stop. And the next thing is, this is a compositional element of diagonals. So I look at this diagonal and then I follow this line right out of the image and I'm gone. And for this image, where is my, yeah. For this image, I would suggest compositionally to flip it, because you've got him on the third line here, which is really nice. He's in the bottom of the image. And you come in and you follow his nose right up to his eyes. And then there's not much here to just take us out of the image. If anything, this diagonal line puts us right back here. So I always recommend flipping the image unless it is an iconic landmark or a building that has writing on it or something local that, you know, everyone around you would know, oh, you flipped that, it doesn't look right. You know, like I'd never go to Tunnel View in Yosemite and take that shot and flip it. But for this out in the snow, I would. I think compositionally now we just rise through this image to a point, and when we come down, we come back in, and it keeps us in the image. So this is really interesting because it has a really fabulous depth of field and background. I really, really enjoyed the depth of field in this. But the story is right here in the center, and it's really, really small. And we do have a leading line in, but we have a leading line, we have two leading lines out. So I want this to be really strong as a subject. And so when I chop this into rules of thirds, there's really not much on the third lines except maybe parts of these logs. This is on a third line, and it really draws my eye because this is a really powerful spot in the image, these third lines. So what can we do to strengthen the composition of an image like this? And I would love to see this cropped in because we don't lose really any sense of that wonderful background. We still get the sense of the tree, giving us a sense of place. This leading line right here and right here, they aren't so strong that they just grab us and take us right out of the image. And now the animal is on the rule of thirds PowerPoint, which is a really comfortable place. And this log serves as a main leading line 2/3 of the way into the image. We get to the animal and then we forget to go out of the image. So we stay here. And then we start noticing the secondary subjects that are really interesting. This balances the animal now, and this darker spot creates a triangle for composition. So now we've got more of a triangular composition that keeps me not only in the image and looking at the image, but it really makes me appreciate the animal. And now that the animal's on the peak here, it really takes a place of dominance, and it's only doing that because of the composition of the image. The pose hasn't changed at all. Everything is the same. It's just now the animal dominates the image. So I always recommend shooting wider than you need at a resolution that you can crop into. And, you know, feel free to interrupt me and make comments. And if this is your image and you can say, I really hate what you did with it and I don't get it, that doesn't hurt my feelings at all, because I'm opinionated and I own my opinions, and you should too. This is really cool, because you do get a sense with the rock face that this is a precipice. You don't really understand what he's doing if you weren't there to see the behavior. And this and this are competing with each other. And although the composition in here is nice, we've got a leading line, we come right up to this PowerPoint here, and we have some repetitive elements, these almost horizontal repeating elements that support the image. So I think those elements are working really nice. We have these diagonals that show us the terrain, and then we've got this rock face that shows us more of the terrain. But because this is because you asked me to do composition, of course I had to make a change. This was the original image, and the animal was kind of small, and we didn't need all of this rock face to support it. And so that's where I went with the image. So we really see the animal as dominant in the image. This is really a pretty shot. You know, the fur is tack sharp, and we go right into those eyes, and And the animal itself provides us all the leading lines we need. Compositionally, we've got this great T here, or Y, and leading right down the nose to back up to the eyes. There's nothing to pull us out of the image, yet there's enough detail here that that we don't feel cheated out of seeing more of the image itself. I would like to see the image. There are two different crops, and it all depends on what you like. If you want to see that animal's face dead center in the image there, and if you want to move it closer to a PowerPoint there, but the composition originally on this is very nice. One thing to remember when you're composing an image is if an animal is facing, or a person is facing or moving in a direction, give them more space in the direction they're going. So this animal is looking this way, and you've given it more space here. And the space is first, and then we get into the animal. If this were flipped, then we'd look at the animal, and then we'd have all this space to draw us out. So in this case, all the compositional elements in here are really working well. And this is similar. Animals looking left. Compositionally, we've left about a third of the image in front of the animal. We're in close, and we still see all the detail in the fur. And so we've got some things, just the shape of the animal taking us around. We get in here, and these are all pointing back in this way. And we've got sort of two subjects when you're photographing an animal like this. You've got, when you're in this close, you really go to the eye, but you've also got the horns to look at as well, but neither of them push you out of the frame. They both keep you right in the frame. So I really enjoyed the composition of that one. And I think the square crop is working for that too. This one, I'm looking at my slides to see if they're in the right order. Yeah, this one, you've got more space. You've got this sort of in the center, but you can't do anything but put this animal in the center. I don't think you need, I think you could just slice a tiny bit off the top. I don't think there's a lot of change that I would do compositionally, just something to make this more prominent. Doesn't need a whole lot of background to give us a sense of place. And if it wasn't shot wider, there's not much that we're going to add to this image. But we have this head nearly in on the third line, and we have space in the direction that the animal's moving. So compositionally, those are really nice. And then the compositional element of framing that's used here works pretty well, because we get a sense of how close the trees are. And these trees all frame and give it a beginning, a middle, and then there's an end behind it. So these elements are used pretty well in this image. This guy, other than controlling your white balance when you process this, which is something you probably should do, this guy is situated almost in the middle here. There's only a little bit more room in front of him than behind him. And I think it would be a little bit more powerful just to move him, just crop enough to move him really more his body to the right side of the image. So there's much more room here than here. And it will really give you more of a sense that the motion is in this direction. And there's no harm in cropping into the resolution that your image will take if it gives you more detail in the subject like this that's isolated and mostly surrounded by negative space. Sometimes we don't need all of that negative space. I did appreciate, whether it was by accident or on purpose, I really liked this little island, this little raft of flora in front of it. It kind of gave the image a second base, this horizontal line, and it's almost a repetitive, here's a horizontal, and here's one. So that these three things kind of line up in a diagonal in the image, and I think that it really works nicely to support the animal without him being in this big oasis of negative space. So when you bring a little of the negative space down, you still have some secondary subjects that balance and even cause a triangle around him or her. And I think that little compositional element works nicely, whether that was intentional or not. It was a nice capture. This is, you know what I really love about this is you can see his breath.
Mhm.
You know, you just can almost hear him because you can see the air moving around him. And that's very nice. Again, to strengthen this image, there are a couple things. One is this animal is dead center. Again, that's not the most dynamic way to look at this kind of image. And secondly, you know, this is, yeah, it serves as a leading line, but it really blends in, and it's like he got stabbed in the chest, and that's why he's howling. And I don't think that's the story you're trying to tell me, but it's the story I get when I look at this. So when you do process your image, I'd recommend taking some room off of this side to move the animal this way and healing out some of this so that it's a leading line and a supporting element. And he's or she is on this rule of thirds line, and you really, I think that it really gives you a more balanced, comfortable way to look at the image, and taking the negative space off doesn't hurt any of the story, and it may even improve the story a little bit. Well, this guy is dead center. He's got a really nice depth of field on this image. You know, where the background, although it probably was very busy, it doesn't compete. So the depth of field was a really nice choice to capture this diagonal, to give us a sense of place and a sense of the terrain. Diagonals aren't always there to lead your eye. Sometimes it's just to give you a sense of where you were. I don't think I would do a whole lot, recommend doing a whole lot. If anything, I might flip it and see what it looked like and take a little off this edge, but I didn't really feel the need to do that because he's kind of moving across the frame here, and eventually he's going to go out and there's enough room for him to move. Now, if his head were turned this way so that his nose was right here, then it would feel really awkward and cramped. And I would recommend, if you shot wider, to add something to this end, or at least take something off the back end. But as it is, it's just a nice little study of this guy out there in the winter on a nice day. What a great story, really. And mesmerized. He gave it a title, Mesmerized. So who's mesmerized, the spectators or the animal? You know, it's just a great dual story about both of them. And the depth of field is nice, such that the animal is tack sharp, which sets it off from the background, and it's standing looking at them. And so being right in the center of the action is fine for this image. Head is turned, so there's no danger of bumping his nose on the side of the image. And there's enough back here to give us a little bit of a sense of place of him really being outdoors and where outdoors he is. So I'm going to say he for all these animals because I just do. And so I think the central composition in here, because it is so balanced with the people, works for this image. This is a shy little guy. So this is an example of our leading line coming down and taking us out of the image. This could be a leading line trying to draw us this way, but the animal is looking this way, and it is so close and so tight. So if you shot this wider and had more, I would suggest putting in more animal. Now, I just did a Photoshop. I cropped it wide and let generative expand fill him in just for this purpose to show you that now that he's looking this way, he's got more body and it feels a little bit more comfortable. It moves his head more to a third over here, even though this eye's really close to the center. In essence, the head has moved over to this side of the image. And he's looking back. So when he's looking back this way, we want to have enough room that it doesn't feel like he's crowded and really cramped in there. We want a sense, if you can, to take a wider picture. Compositionally, I think that would work better for this image. Because your strongest leading line is right here, and his eyes are looking this way. Again, nice use of diagonal here for the lead in, and we get here and there's a nice triangular body shape. And so that's another nice compositional element. I think the thing about, and coming in from this side and being able to follow the back up and then land here nearly perfectly in the rule of thirds intersection here with the head, I think that's a really great composition for just an animal sitting out in the snow. I do think it's just a little bit crowded, and I think if you gave him just a little bit more room, I think that it would really stand out a lot. And if you shot this wider, then I would recommend cropping it a little wider. And I hope you don't mind me filling these things in as an example. This isn't necessarily how I would process these. If these were mine, I'd actually be careful and make sure things matched and all of that. But just for the point of giving you examples. So there's several groups of bison that I guess that's what these are, that you photographed. And I think one of the most interesting things about bison, because they don't grow in Durham, North Carolina, are the winter fur layers. I just think they're so cool. I think one of the things about an image like this is deciding what kind of depth of field you want on it, because here's your diagonal. And you're using perspective, and you're using those diagonals to create perspective. When you do process this image, it kind of looks like this one's butt's on fire. So you may want to treat that a little bit. And you may want to change the color of this post if you leave it in your image, if you're processing an image, only because this color's interesting to our eyes. This is mostly a monochrome image, and this line takes us right out to the end of and then you're like, oh, I wonder what that post is for. Is that to show the snow depth? Is that to tell you where you're going? Is that something else? So you don't want your viewer to get caught up in that. I think this one on its own is very nice because, again, rule of odds. It looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It looks like 5. It's probably more than that, but my eye wants to see 5. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sets of horns here and 1 set here. And so it really fits that sense of the rule of odds that your eye sees, even if you don't count them. Your eye sees these things and your brain sees, oh, odds, I like that. So there are a lot of nice compositional elements here. There's the rule of odds. There is these perspective lines here. There's primary subject, secondary subject. So there are a lot of nice compositional elements here. So here's a similar herd, and I'm going to move that. Similar herd, 5 main animals. The difference between these is that the way the snow is captured on this, it gives the entire image this grainy feeling. the snow on their fur, and one animal blends into another animal. And I think when you're in this close, and you're this crowded, you're starting to lose some of your compositional elements. You've got repetitive elements here, which are nice compositional elements. You've got repetitive elements in the background. You've got your rule of odds working for you, and things like that in the image itself. The only thing I'd recommend for this image is to just give them a little bit more space. Shoot wider than you need to shoot. Just enough space that you really get a sense of place and they're one cohesive subject in your image. If you really are trying to isolate the one in the center, that's a different depth of field that you choose, and then it would be just the rule of one with one main subject. Here, they kind of, because they're so crowded in the frame, you're losing kind of your rule of odds, and this is becoming one big subject. And when you set them off a little bit, they start to recover their individuality, and you begin to see whole animals again. So I would, again, this one I would recommend shooting wider. I like it stretched right across the middle of the image, though. And another thing to point out is when you're composing your images, try to leave a little more room above their heads than below their feet. That just makes the human eye feel a little bit more comfortable in an image like this. Here's another group. And this group had more room to begin with. And we have these same 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 main subjects right in front where we see almost their whole bodies. We've got a group here and we've got a little group here. So we have a kind of a primary subject, a secondary subject. So this separation just gives a little bit of variation. We've got all those vertical repetitive elements going on here, and we've got the same repetitive elements going on there. Those are really nice rules of composition, elements of composition. And so giving it space like this image has, I think sets them off as individuals instead of a group that's blending together. Again, this has less space on the bottom than it has on the top. So at least in my gut, that feels much more comfortable to look at. So I thought this was an interesting image. Here we come in and we see these guys and we look, and then we get to this guy's butt, and that's where the eye lands, is right on this guy's butt. And we've already looked at these guys because we're drawn up here, and we miss the great detail. I mean, look at that eye capture. That's awesome, but I had to force myself to go back and really look at that. The fur on these right here and here, the detail is really great. We're missing that part here because he's turned away, and all we get is that smooth butt. So I would recommend, even though rule of odds, 1, 2, 3, even though we are moving in a diagonal in this image, the diagonal's leading me to here, and I want to stay there. So I'd recommend flipping this image so you can here. And you see, you see that, but you're not really that interested in it. And the diagonal of the composition now brings you down to these animals. And instead of landing on their butt, you really land on where I think the maker wanted our attention to go. So flipping your images is always a really interesting adventure. And I recommend you do it when you're not sure about your composition. Especially because
can
they
I
don't
jump
have
in with a
name tags.
question?
Sure.
So I've noticed a couple of times when you've flipped it, you're sort of basing your assumption on people reading left to right. And I have been told in the past that if you're ever going to be thinking about international audiences for your pictures, some cultures read right to left. So how does that figure into your flipping?
I've asked that question before, And I have someone in my image salon group who was in a workshop. I honestly can't remember. I think it was either in China or Japan. It was Asian. It was somewhere where they read differently, and they were with a museum curator and asked that question, and they said that it didn't matter.
Oh,
They
that's
said it
very
didn't.
interesting.
Because then again, there are some cultures that read top to bottom. Yeah, and that was the answer that he got, and I thought that was really, really interesting. So yeah, I think we need to keep asking that question, because I think every time we ask it, we get a slightly different answer. You're going to notice that my screen just turned a little bit on the warm side. It's 9 o'clock here, and I have my blue light screen on my where it cuts the blue light so that it doesn't keep you up at night if you work on your computer late at night, and I forgot to turn it off for this. So we're going to pretend that the white balance is there for these images. If it's really bothering you, I can go in and find the setting.
It actually looks the same.
Oh, well, it looks very pink on my screen. This one reads really nicely. I think that the subject is this right here, that mask of snow. I go through here and I love looking at the fur. And there's enough detail in the snow that I don't feel like, this is just plastered here. And I see them and I look through here, and because this guy is the subject, I don't mind that there's not much room here, because I'm not going there this isn't a leading line for me, because for me, this is right where I want to land, and it's in a really great place in the image itself. So I'm perfectly fine with that. I don't think that I would change the crop. So to be very honest, because of the contrast between the dark and the light, I never even saw the wolf the first time I looked at this. And I thought this was like a tree stump. I never even saw another animal there. These two really did command my attention. And I feel like they take up the bottom. They're in a place of high contrast. And then this all was sort of noise that gave me a sense of place. And so when I really looked at the image, I thought maybe a crop, like I don't think we need this down here. It kind of draws the eye, and it almost looks like some kind of border that was put on, and I look at it and wonder what it is and all of that. So, I'm thinking that a crop up here somewhere would be great. And if I could bring this wolf into a better place in the image, then I really would get the story a whole lot faster. And if the resolution of the image will hold, now I think I have a triangle between the three animals. This is close to the upper PowerPoint. These are on the third line down here, and there seems to be a much better play for me. If I were processing this image, if it was mine, I might take this one out even, or maybe just lighten it so that it just didn't draw my eye. But I think this gives the wolf better play, and I think we really get into the story, and we're not pulled out by little parts of the image that don't really contribute. I also think the trees make this really flow nicely when they're cropped in like that. So don't be afraid to crop and see what story you're trying to tell. If that wasn't the story you were trying to tell, then maybe you were trying to tell a story about camouflage or hiding, and then the larger image might tell that story better. So think about what your story is that you're trying to tell, and what elements compositionally to keep in there. So now the triangle makes this a little stronger so that we really see the wolf, as opposed to if the story were about the wolf hiding or something like that. Boy, I had to look at this one for a long time. This was such a great capture in the moment. They almost looked like, sheep that had climbed a tree or something. It just took me a minute to get the perspective on this. And the title, Elk in Trees, is just hysterical. Compositionally, the tree's in a great place. It's on the third. It's got, it's got these horizontal branches, and yet it really tricks our eyes because we know that these animals aren't climbing the tree. So the maker has done a really great job of drawing us into the story, and the humor of it, and the perspective of the human eye. And so I think all of this actually works really well because we aren't expecting to see anything back here. We're expecting to see the tree and enjoy the branches. And so these are like a real plus. Now this one's in the middle and we look at it a lot, but we've got this one up here. And so, this guy takes me right back to the tree that takes me right back here. And so I can just oscillate around the image this way. So I really enjoyed that, and I enjoyed the composition of it. I love crows and ravens, so I really enjoyed looking at this one. What I noticed about it, not only the detail in the tree, but the detail in the feathers. And I really want this to be the thing I look at in this image, but there's so much interesting stuff out here. And I really had to consider compositionally what's going on. Well, we've got this circle here, and then we've got this, but we've got this branch going here, and it's pretty interesting. It's got a pair of eyes in it, and the human eye always recognizes things like that. And then we kind of get back down here, but I'm missing the crow. The tree is so interesting, or the raven. I'm missing it. And so I think a crop that kept in this wonderful leading arch, and it probably could have taken one of these eyes out even so that we don't get up there and stay there. But then this branch comes in and it gives us a more circular view of getting in tight to the crow. And if your resolution can hold that kind of crop, now, I mean, this guy is the subject, and this almost mirrors, this almost becomes a repetitive element, almost like the shape of the crow. So now we don't have this circle drawing our eye, and we don't have, and the strength of this branch is less branches there. And so the crow breaks, or the raven breaks it up, and we get to sit there and look at the bird. So I really would recommend using this wonderful arch as a long lead in and doing this in more of a panoramic perspective. And then we really get to meet our subject. I don't know why it's not changing. There we go. These owl captures were really, really great. Yeah, look at that guy. Look at you go straight to those eyes. And everything in here. And I really enjoyed the way the little pine needles on this were mimicking it looks like wet feathers, the spikiness of the wet feathers. So repetitive elements in here, nice compositional element. It's, for me, I was trying to decide if it was off balance. The tail's going this way, the branch is going this way. It's kind of a nice balance. I think you could strengthen this with a bit of a crop to take the bird out of the center and make it a little bit more dynamic. And I flipped it so that the tail was on this side. So it felt more balanced. This became more of a leading line into the bird, and the tail so little it didn't take me out. But now we have just a little bit more of a dynamic relationship of the bird in the frame. I think this is maker's choice, optional. I may not have even done that if we weren't talking about composition tonight. But I do feel like this is a little stronger. And then when we come to this one, it now has that same composition of the leading line, the bird, the little tail coming out, and now the repetitive elements are more in the shape and tone of the feathers. So I'm really enjoying that. Depth of field allowed all of this to, even though it's very, very busy, it allowed it to stand on its own in the frame. If you were processing this, I would urge you to consider what to do with this. It almost competes. It's almost the same size as the bird's body. It's a little bit brighter. It's the same high contrast with the background. So you may want to, crop here. You may want to heal all of this out. But the bird on the branch, that's a very strong composition, slightly off center. The color palette is supporting it. This is really a nice capture. Oh, and this one. This is just one of those images. I mean, when you look at it, I mean, it's so creative and artsy with the shutter speed such that you just get this hint of the wings, yet you still get the expression. I would love to have seen the bird a little bit sharper. And sharpening software may be something you want to apply to the face of this bird. Maybe, maybe not. That's maker's choice. Certainly your exposure was very, very bright, and you may want to play and bring the exposure down. The one thing I would say about this image is that it has a lot of negative space. And as an element of composition, I'm not sure that it's on your side. Seems to me that half of the image, more than half of the image, is negative space. And this is the subject. I mean, we want that bird to land. Man, we want to know it's going to connect with that branch because it's coming in hot. We get that kind of story. So this is an image I think you can really cheat on. And because the background is all white, I think you can cheat and bring the bird a little closer to the branch and maybe change the composition from this more vertical image to here. And now we've got the bird really in a strong third, and we know it's going to hit that branch. We know it's going to land there. And we know it because we saw it there in the previous two images. But we really want this to land there. And so I would just, with an image like this, you've got an incredible amount of latitude to tell your story. Almost because of the white background. But when you crop out just enough of the white background, these two elements, whoops, wait a minute. These two elements now balance each other in the image. And this one in particular balances the bird in the image more so than it did, I think, in the other version. And so these are really nice elements of composition where the secondary subject balances the primary subject, again, over on this side of the image, over on this side of the image, and provides really nice balance. So even in an image that has almost nothing in it, composition is still really important. So this is a really pretty scene. And it's prettier when my nightlight stuff isn't on. It's made this look a little darker than it really was. I think there are a couple of great things about this image and a couple of challenges. I love that this leads in and this edge leads down, and they both take us to the water. I think that's really nice. I think the shape of the rock is such that this leans down. So we have this really nice V shape and then almost a triangle with the snow in the background. And yet this isn't a strong enough line to take us out. So compositionally, I think this is done really nicely. A couple things to note is this is a really big bright spot and it is the brightest thing in the image. And so my eye tends to go there and kind of get stuck. And my first thought was to take some of it out, like take a half of it out. But if I do that, I probably need to balance it by taking a little bit off the top. And then I flipped it. And now this isn't so prominent. I took a little of it off and I took a little of the top off, but now this becomes a leading line and goes whoop, and this keeps us in it. Keep your eye there, keep your eye there. And even this one now becomes a prominent, I didn't even notice this when it was the other way. Even this becomes a little bit of a leading line. And now we're in this third and we've got our subject. We came all through this interesting stuff in the image. And then we had a place to land that we weren't drawn away from. So again, it's a matter of what feels right to you in your gut when you're looking at it. And sometimes it's hard because you know what it looked like. If you're trying to capture this for photojournalistically to say, this is the hike that we took, that's one thing. Then you don't flip it. You don't want to do that. But if you're doing this for the purpose of art, you want to hang something on your wall or your friend does, or, you know, somebody that lives in the desert wants this wonderful winter scene, you know, play with your composition and make it compositionally more correct. And for someone who didn't hike that every day in the winter. Okay, I'm just looking at my folder to see where I am in the, how are we doing for time? Am I going fast enough?
Yeah, I think the pace is great.
Okay. This is really lovely. I really love these kinds of landscapes that are virtual, but I mean they're there and you understand what it was, but it's a little bit abstract. And I think that these kinds of landscapes are important because I think they can really evoke mood. I think they really let the viewer make of the image what they want. And so, you know, I'm looking, so I just emotionally really can connect to this image. It's uncomplicated, and yet it has some really intricate things in it, but it's uncomplicated. And I love all of the lines that take you through the image, and you can go anywhere you want in this image, and you're always taken back into the image. So really nice for composition. There are a couple of things that I played with. One is I got the sense that this is not a black and white image. I got a sense that there's this blue in here. And I kept looking for the blue to be, well, where is it? Is it a little bluer there? Or is it my eyes trying to make it blue? And so I actually turned it black and white so that I wasn't so distracted by this. And then we've got this leading line and it takes us to the brightest part of the image. And our eye is often drawn to the brightest part of the image, regardless of the composition. And we have a big leading line coming in here and a big leading line here. And so this to me is the center of interest of the image, but there's a lot more to this image I don't get to because I get to the center of interest really quickly and then I just don't get to the rest of it. So I would recommend, well, come on, making this the big leading line. And then when you get to your center of interest, you stay there and you got to enjoy all of these things along the way and you're not drawn away from them. So for me, I enjoyed this image even more when I'm not fighting with the color. I think I could have added more contrast, but I really love the simplicity of this. And then I get to where I think is the center of interest without missing anything in the image. I mean, there's really cool texture here and different cool texture here. So really nicely captured. This is nearly an abstract. I just really enjoyed this. You know, the fog taking the detail out of the bottom of the tree, and the snow and maybe the hoarfrost, I can't tell, on the tree. And oh gosh, I'm just losing the tips of the branches, and I wish it had a little more room to live in. But compositionally, we're really great. We're on this side of the image, and we have all of these repetitive kind of fractal-like elements that keep me right here in the tree. And I did wonder if I had a wider crop, would I like a wider crop? And I think I would, because I think it gives this a better place to live, that's all of its own in the image, and it's not competing with the edges to live in the image. And I don't think that the extra space takes away from enjoying this. I think it just gives us a little bit of breathing room so we don't feel as tense, because I think this is a really peaceful scene. And when it's really crowded like this, we lose some of the peacefulness of it. If that's your story, I mean, it's the story I get from the image is really the peacefulness of this. And so I really think a little bit wider view of it might isolate this in a place where I can really enjoy that. So there's a lot of nice composition in this one. I really love skiing down this hill. And then, oh, all of these curves, the way that these berms and these little hills are captured is very, very sensuous against the brittleness of the tree and then the brittleness of the mountain. So these set each other off really nicely. And there's great detail and contrast back here. And this is a little softer. So this is almost three-dimensional. We get this soft sense of the beginning and the middle, and then at the end, we still have some sharpness and contrast. And so this just keeps me moving all the way around. I don't think we need quite as much negative space up here because it really doesn't help us tell the story. Even with the clouds down here, it doesn't help us tell the story. And some of this on the bottom, it would, you know, if we put this in a little bit of a crop, we have this great panoramic feel, and we're not bothered by a lot of extra negative space, and we still get this curve here, which is the main curve that we look at. I mean, this is where the eye goes. This is the first center of interest, and we've got another one here and another one here. So we don't think of this as a triangular composition, but it is, because our three landing places, 1, 2, 3, out in the mountains, maybe here, form this kind of triangle, and they feed into each other. So the composition takes us back and forth, and I think it's really well done. And I think I chopped a little bit too much off the bottom, but just to give you that sense of panorama and the movement around this part of the image, I would take just a little off. It's another, you know, this is, look at the reed on this. Look at the reed, leading line, dark, contrasty space, captures our eye, zoom, and then we've got this really great run down here, and we get into the river or the stream or the meltway, whatever it is. We do have a bit of a horizon in the center of the image, and in a lot of images, that is not the most powerful place compositionally to have the horizon. And I played with this a little bit to see how I felt about it. And I feel like when we take the bottom of this off, so I'm going to go back because you may not have noticed it, but this kind of has a leading line that doesn't have anything to do with the rest of the image. And if we take some of this off, then these two streams, and I may have done a little too much there, but these two streams are, yeah, have the whole image. These two streams are now leading lines. So now we go here and here and here, and we get to the stream, and we go here and pick this up and come across. So this gains a very circular composition that I think flows better, no pun intended, with the water both leading in the same direction. But this is lovely, the way this is composed originally. Yeah, what a pretty sight. There's really not much I would change compositionally. This is a really nice sweep. The sun's a bit in the middle. I think we don't need quite as much of these trees, and we could move the sun over a little bit, but basically, this was where we started. And then we moved the sun over a little bit, and I think that's just a tad stronger and more dynamic, but it has some really beautiful compositional elements. The diagonal here, and the uprights here and here, and then the swirl here that takes us to the middle of the image. Everything takes us to the middle of the image. So compositionally, I think that one was really done well. I took a little bit of negative space off the bottom, and then some of the trees that aren't necessary to the story itself, to move the sun out of the center of the image.
Like that.
So I think this one, I'm looking at my file over here, where I am. Yeah. This is really nice, 1, 2, 3 rule of odds, and they serve as a single compositional element, because you look at them and you go, oh, 1, 2, 3. Oh, cool. Look at that person down there with the red hat. And then look at the path. And you know what? We visited all the parts of this image, and now we're going to take the path out and go on our merry way. This path does not serve to take me out of the image before I need to leave the image. I don't think we need all the foreground, and I don't think we need all the sky, but it doesn't change. It doesn't change anything to take a little of it off. This tree becomes less prominent, and the whole story of walking out here becomes more prominent in the image. And we still have these wonderful 3 repetitive elements, even though they're not identical, taking us straight here. We also, no, we didn't. Yeah, and so I think those elements work well. And you might say, oh, look, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 things. That's not the rule of odds, but it is, because you've got primary subjects 1, 2, 3, and you've got a secondary subject that's 1. And so these 4 things actually work together because they're not 4 of the same thing. So that's where the rule of odds comes into play in this image. This is a really intriguing scene. Really, really enjoyed the capture of this. There's a lot to look at. The place I want to land, of course, is right here. It's the brightest, and it has the most interesting pattern. It's in an area of some contrast. So my eye goes right there. I skip this. Well, I don't skip this, but I look at this coming in, but I go right there without looking at the rest of the image. And I think that that's where I want to be. I'm not sure this adds to the story of the image. I played with a crop. This doesn't need a crop, but I played with it just to change the composition a little bit, with the idea that now we have 1, 2, 3, and we come into this image and we notice these trees. Now, I didn't really notice them much in the beginning, but they take me right here. And then this cliff sort of anchors me in there. I would do a better job cropping the bottom so that I don't have these intersecting elements right at the edge of the image. But the crop was really to show you how strong the image becomes when you move your subject out of the center. And then how, once you move this out of the center, how other elements in the image, because of how they're positioned now, can become supporting characters in the image more than they were. I always love these lone tree kinds of images. I'm just going to point out that this image, I don't know if it was sharpened or if it was just photographed this way, but when you have an area of really high contrast, like almost black tree, almost white sky, you're going to get these halos. And I'm going to move in just a little bit to show you. This can be an artifact of sharpening. It can be an artifact of some of the noise reduction apps, or it can be an artifact of the scene itself. If you ever wanted to put this image into a competition, you would have to deal with the halation in this image. That isn't really acceptable. Sometimes you see it from cropping into a scene that doesn't have enough resolution, to support it. So I just wanted to point that out to the maker. And this, to be honest, I think that the part of this, even though this snow field is fabulous, you know, it becomes sort of the main subject because this line leads me right down in here. And I got really stuck in enjoying all of the shapes and the tonal range of this. And if I wanted the story to be about the tree, I made it about the tree. So we as artists have control over how we tell our stories. And I wanted, from that image, I personally wanted the story to be about the trees because it's still about the snow as a secondary subject, because I still have all the wonderful tones in the snow itself, all the wonderful shapes. The mountain now becomes a leading line right to this tree. And it's really wonderful, the mist, or maybe it's blowing snow, whatever it is, maybe it's a hot springs. I don't know what's causing that, but it really does set the tree off nicely. And then it fades on this side, so I'm not really drawn to any real areas of high contrast here. So the area of high contrast here just gets me to the tree. And then this story for me was all about the tree. That may not be the story the maker wants, but I'm just telling you the stories that I see and how I would get to those stories if this were my image. This image has a lot of interesting pieces to it. It's got the mist. It's got the windows from the bus or whatever you were riding in at the time. I probably would not try to deal with those unless I was producing this image to sell or to enter into competition. I think it's actually a nice part of the story of your trip to Yellowstone. But you know, that's just me looking at this as a photo taken on a trip. The one or two things that I would correct: this leading line in here is a really strong compositional element, taking us into the scene and allowing us to land here. I think these shrubs and this walkway are very secondary. This is partially buried. It's not as dark. Tonally, this is much stronger and it's in the foreground. So when we have such a strong horizontal element, I would make it horizontal. I would, if you're going to have this coming in, I would straighten it because the tree's already leaning. And the posts on the boardwalk some of them were already leaning. They weren't all perfectly straight. So I don't change anything about this image. I'd probably take this sign out, but I don't change anything about this image except that I make these, this element be as strong as it can be, leading me into the image and then getting me to this scene right here. This is really, I really enjoyed this. It's so moody. And I imagine these mountains are really moody, not having seen them myself. And so I really appreciated the moodiness, and I appreciated in the dark areas that the detail was held. You know, that's always really important. This is an image that I wouldn't necessarily change the composition if it's a landmark and you know exactly how that's supposed to look, and all of your friends and family and neighbors all know how this looks. I wouldn't flip it, but compositionally, if I don't know the scene, this is one of the brighter areas, and I come in and I see that, and as soon as I get to the bright area, I follow the mountain up. This is the most sharpest area of contrast. So here is where I want my viewers to land in here. This is more in shadow. And so this is like, come look at me, I'm spectacular. And so I think that the light clouds coming in and then catching the leading line here take me right to the top there. And because this side of the mountain is dark, I'm not even tempted to leave this image when it's flipped this way. So when it's the other way, I lose, like, I just jump over all of that and I see that, but the leading line takes me down to this little thing, this knob here. And when I flip the image, I never even notice the knob. It's just part of the stuff that gets me to what I see as the good part of the image. So again, it's my preference. It's the story I get. And you have to remember that when people look at your images, they're going to get their own story from it. And sometimes it's the story you're trying to tell. And sometimes it is not that story. But this allows me to get someplace and land someplace in the image, and in this spectacular scenery. So this was interesting here. I'm gonna admit this. You know where my eye landed? Right here. I'm like, is that like a bird's nest? Could an eagle be living there? Is someone building a nest there? I got so stuck there that I had to like shake my head and come back to reality. And I don't know why. I think it's because it is in an area of really high contrast because it's so dense and so defined in shape. The other place I got stuck was here because I kept trying to make a roof there. And I'm thinking, wow, is this like a half underground house? And so I got stuck, really, really stuck in these two places. And I know the trees are kind of trying to lead me somewhere, but when I get there, I don't have anything that defines this area. So I played a little bit with cropping and twisting and turning, and that is not where I got to. And I came to this, where I come to the undefined area first by flipping it. And then these bright areas start carrying me through the image. And yeah, I see that, but it just doesn't seem as prominent when I'm coming this way. And then I really get down to this little glade, this open area where the trunks are more individual and a little sharper. And I really get to see the depth of this area of wooded area. And so this is kind of in the lower third. And so this prevents me from just, the whole image looking the same and traveling right out of it. So I let this be my entry point, and then I kind of just travel through the image, and then I catch this and I see this area, and I'm really interested. Oh, look, there's more of it back there. It's a clearing. I wonder if deer come here and would I see those or what's here in the winter? And so I can create more of a story with this composition for myself. That's where we started. Okay, this is the original. Really interesting perspective. It's very creative way to photograph the trees. We're now into all the pictures of the trees, and these trees are so captivating, just their shapes. And this image did a nice job of putting the darker, denser part of the trees over here on the third line, and the contrast between seeing the ice on the window and then seeing what's outside of it. It's just a wonderful combination. When you're seeing something like this, make sure your camera's level when you're this close to the window, because the camera was probably tilted a little bit so that your what was in focus started a little bit later in your image. I'm guessing the camera was sort of tilted back toward you a little bit. And you're losing some of that wonderful sharpness of the ice in the top. And I thought, oh, does that take away from it? What if I really didn't like all that unsharp stuff? Well, cropping in doesn't really do anything bad to this image. In fact, I think it strengthens it, really gets us seeing the shape of this, and we can really get lost in this forest.
Be good girl.
Instead of,
Okay.
we get lost in the forest instead of wandering around up here. For me, for the maker, it may have been really important for the maker to have the tops of these trees in here to show that, what the tops look like. But I don't get that story when I look at this as a viewer. And so this story made sense to me because I thought this part of the image was just fabulous. Seeing the sleet on the window.
Mhm.
There's a whole series of these. And I think a lot of you took similar shots, but it's so interesting to see how differently you all approached it. So I want to go through these next, I don't remember how many. I want to go through these all together as a group. And we're just starting here because it was first in my lineup. These are just a really interesting feature. There's a clump here and then a few singles and then this little one here, and you kind of work your way through, and then there's some blue sky, so you kind of get a feel for what kind of day it was when you hit this. You could crop if you wanted to and bring this down further and come in closer, but it's not 100% necessary. I mean, you see this and you travel through it, and there's a little more room in the direction that your eye is going, and so this worked just fine. Here's another different exposure of it. Now, when I go back to here, I look at this one and then I come here, and this is the first time I noticed the tree shadows. I didn't notice them so much, but these become part of the subject just because of the way the light is captured. I'm guessing this was a little bit later. There's a bit more blue sky right there. And these have more room around them and they're more isolated. There's more of the moodiness of the sky. So this is just a totally different take on this same scene, which I thought was interesting. And then I just cropped it to be about the size of the image before it, so that you look at it, but you see it very differently than you saw the one that had the blue sky and not quite as much contrast. So just different interpretations of the same scene. Here's another. This one is just this part of the image. So this maker chose, here's a subject on the third line, and then this other grouping, which is a secondary subject on the other third with the horizon lower in the image. And I think that that works really nicely as well. It's yet another take, and I wouldn't have any changes to the composition of this. Here's another, I don't know if it's the same group taken earlier, if this is the one and the central group, and I don't know, this could be a different group of trees, but again, it's a different take. It's a much more contrasty. I think we're losing a little bit of space here. I think we need some of that space for this image, but I didn't crop it differently to show that, but a little more space above than below works. And if you do go to process this image, make sure you take care of both the sensor dust here and the lens dust. It may have been water on the lens or something, but definitely dust on your sensor. Make sure you take care of that. But the contrasty version is interesting as well. This has a little bit more terrain in it. It has a little bit more of a sense of place, slightly different perspective, but I think it's so interesting how you all saw this. And here's
Chris,
yet
could you
another
just go,
view.
could you go back to the previous image for a second? I want to ask you a question.
Mhm.
So at the very top where you said you would like to see a little bit more space, what if you actually brought the top line down so it was
Yes, you could
touching
do
the
that as
tree?
well. The way that we did with this one, you know, these are getting kind of crowded, and I brought the top down. Yeah, as a maker, it's your choice. But the idea is that when you're this close to the edge of your image, you're probably making it more uncomfortable than it needs to be. So yeah, it's like photographing people. You know, either you leave some space above their head, or you crop and far enough down in the hairline that it makes sense. You know, you don't just crop a tiny bit off.
Okay, go.
And here we are in the same scene. You know, the bus had moved slightly, you know, 10 yards further, and shooting back at it. Or maybe it was earlier, I don't know. The things that when you process this, that you also need to pay attention to, I'll mention, is the color shifting in the sky. You see the bands of magenta and cyan. You would need to kind of deal with that if you're going to print this, because I think when you print this, you're really going to see that breaking down. And I think this one could have stood some kind of crop to balance it. And I do think the horizon is crooked on this one, and I probably would just shift this a little bit. And here's another view of similar scene, contrasty, black and white. I would have made, I mean, I like this as a panorama. This, whatever this is here, it may be something of importance to you on your trip. I can't really tell what it is. But that may be something really significant in this scene, that as a person viewing this in person, this might have been really important. So if you're going to leave it in, you need to leave it in for a reason, because it really does take the eye away from this. But if you're going to take it out, then I would just crop above it. Again, it depends what story you want to tell, but here compositionally, you've got the horizon right in the center of the image. And for this image, you may decide that's okay, because you've got a black sky and a white bottom in it, and it really, the scene really in real life is dissected by that, and having the elements of interest spanning both of those almost equally may just bring a certain kind of balance to your image for your eye. So it again depends on the story you're telling, but always take the time to look and say, now what are my compositional elements? Oh, I've got the horizon in the middle. Do I like that? Does it work for this image? No, it's really uncomfortable. Yeah, I really love the way it dissects dark and light. You have to look at your image and look at the compositional elements and see what they're doing for your story. Here's another yet very different version of this. And the only thing I would do is this sun is a prominent part of the image, and I just would crop it to put that dead center, because your eye's gonna want to see that pretty much dead center. Doesn't mind that this isn't dead center, because these are all spaced in varying degrees of distance. So this doesn't bother. And I might have even cropped or healed out some of the bright spots down here so that my eye doesn't get drawn there. But for this image, I would definitely, because of the prominence of the sun, and it is the brightest spot in your whole image, I would move that into the center. Here is, this might be, no, there's one more view. So, you know, here's another, this one is nicely balanced with, I think I can't tell if it's water or not, or just ground, but with this breaking up the image, it balances this part. And it really, for me, makes these trees the subject because of the way it's balanced. And I want to move my subject really out of the middle a little bit. And really let this take a role in the image more than it does. And now this really becomes my subject on the power line for me. And then the last image is this one, which has so many compositional elements. It has the horizon not in the center. It has repetitive elements all the way across. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So it for a landscape image, it has all that it needs to have there. It has an S-curve, which is really interesting. And the only thing that I would do, if I were processing this, I'd probably take that out just because it doesn't fit with the rest of the image and it might draw my eye away. And I definitely would try flipping this image. And now your S-curve is how you wander into this stand of trees. And now you wander in and, oh yeah, you know what? I never noticed this stream goes right back there. I mean, it keeps me right into the center of the image. And now this dark set of trees here is where we land. We land right here in the image. When it was the other way, these were here. And yeah, and that's nice, but I see these first and then I go out of the image. When I flip the image, I come in and then I see all of the S-curves that I didn't notice the first time. And then this dark area of trees becomes a place to land in the image, and I never leave the image. So I'm done. So that's the way I look at, and there's so many compositional elements. There are triangles and diamonds, and you know them all, S-curves and repetitive elements, and horizons not in the middle, and the proper use of negative space. And, you know, it goes on and on. I think you could probably list 20 of them among all of us. Color is one. The choice of going to black and white can be a compositional element. The orientation of the image, whether it's landscape or portrait, there are so many things that contribute. And of course, we don't use all of those elements in one image. We definitely don't. But as long as we were using the compositional elements that we have in ways that tell your story and take your viewer where you want the viewer to go, then we're doing something. Comments? Questions? Disagreements? Feel free to disagree with me.
I'm
Hey,
going to
Chris,
go
this is-
back
this
and
is
do a-
Barney. Go ahead, Charlotte.
Oh, I was just going to tell Chris that now I'm going to go back and I'm going to do a lot of flipping and looking at photos in a different way.
You know,
And
there's, yeah, it's really worth flipping things that don't have words and they're not iconic. And remember that you saw the scene and you photographed it the way you saw it. So you might be more comfortable with your original version because that's what you experienced. So it's hard to take yourself out of that equation and let yourself be a brand new viewer. There's one other thing I do want to say. If you're never sure, and I'm just going to go back through, there was an image I thought was a really great example of this. Hold on. Bear with me for a minute. Oh, I'm going to go back quite a ways. Let's see. The easiest way for me to do this. Close your eyes so I don't make you dizzy. Nope, 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 nope. Yeah. So, nope. Yeah. So in this image, I have two areas of interest because they're triangles. Both of them are triangles. One's bright, one's dark. They're both contrasty as far as the image lets me be contrasty. And I'm like, how is this image going to look? I would personally, I would flip the image upside down where you don't have any context and look to see where does your eye go. My eye goes here, so that must be my landing area. And so I want my landing area to be somewhere where I'm comfortable landing in the image. If I wasn't sure, I would turn my image upside down so I lose the context and I can just look at where does my eye go.
Yeah, that's funny that you did that because.
And it may be a shape. It may not be the brightest area. It may be a particular shape. For example, if right down here there was a little tree or a blade of grass, and you turn the image upside down and that is the thing you see, then you know that that's where your eye's going to land, and then you can manipulate your composition around that to make sure that you feel the right thing in your gut.
I think that's a very good critique in that point. I usually flip mine horizontally, but I've never flipped it vertically. So, and I agree with
Well,
you.
vertically takes you out of what you know is in there. Like, I took this because I loved that, and that's the part, and I want the image to look like this. And then if you flip it, you're like, but you know what? I don't know that my viewers are going to go there and look at that because I like rocks. And so I loved that rock, but man, look at that tree there. That's really commanding the upside down attention. So it may help you sort out where to crop, where to dodge and burn, what to do with your image.
We had a
Great.
question.
Thank you for your critique, for sure.
Yeah, it wasn't
Chris,
so
would
much-
you flip that again, please?
Just before you decided to flip it horizontally, I was gonna say, a friend of mine a long time ago said, if you want to see what's going on with your eye, flip it horizontally. And so it's true, because then, and he also said, walk away from the image and come back 10 minutes later after it's flipped and then see where your eye goes.
Barney, did you mean upside down?
Yeah,
Yeah,
upside down.
like that. It's just so different.
Yeah.
This is
Like-
truly an abstract. You can't, it's very hard. It's not very hard. It's harder to make this a landscape, but when you look at it this way, it feels more like a sand dune with a really great shadow.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, yeah, always I mean, you're the artist. You don't have to keep your image in the same plane that in the same orientation that you took the image in.
Wait,
We were having a conversation before the meeting about people who had learned shooting 8x10 or 4x5, where everything's upside down, what a benefit it was. So, yeah. I have a quick question. Is there, in the age of high definition TVs where everything's like a 16:9 ratio, has that changed the way people prefer to see photos? As opposed to kind of the standard things we've been given with 35 millimeter and I don't know.
Well, that's a hard question to answer, because I think really good filmmakers who are making things for that aspect ratio are paying attention to their lighting and their composition for that aspect ratio. So I think it's more important that your image fit your aspect ratio than it fit a particular aspect ratio. Does that make sense?
I think so, because a lot of the times when you're shooting 2x3 on 35 millimeter, you only want the square, you only want 4x5 or 4x3, where you may want panorama. So I think you have to see the image that you see, and then, if you have to shoot it wide to get it, or you shoot multiples to stitch into something that you want, that's up to you.
No, I agree. I used to crop a 16 by 20 for prints, and now it's 13 by 19. So it's quite a different print.
Yeah, but no matter what your aspect ratio is, you have to pay attention to your composition. And if your
Right.
composition supports the whole image, then the aspect ratio, if it's right for the image, shouldn't matter. I mean, I really do recommend people not crop an image to a 4x5 or a 2x3 just because that's the size frame that's convenient to buy, whatever it is. I mean, you really have to crop the image for the image. And don't be afraid to do some wacky abnormal crop if that's what works for your image. Questions, comments?
I enjoyed this very much.
Yeah, I love the critiques. They're some really thought provoking, because obviously I looked at them before the meeting also, but and saw something, you really brought out some other ideas than what I had looked at, so what I had thought about it.
yeah.
I think one of the most important things is to just give yourself permission. We have these rules, and the rules are made to be broken.
Chris?
Yeah.
There was a photo earlier that had, you said, the magenta and cyan in it.
Yeah.
And what caused that? You talked about the color shift, and what causes it, and how do you avoid it?
I can't remember if it was a black and white image or not.
I think it was.
No, it was color. Keep going, keep going, keep going.
Keep going, keep going, keep going.
Yeah.
Was it that one? No.
That one has it, and there was another one that had it.
That one has it, and
It had some that's it. It had some banding.
I don't know, and
It's chromatic aberration.
it's really it's really, and I have to be careful because I wear bifocals, and when you wear bifocals, if you don't look directly through the line, that can cause chromatic aberration. Like, it's not in the image, it's the way my glasses make me see it. So I always have to be really, really careful with that. I think what I would do about it is if you use Photoshop in the gallery, filter gallery that has been in Photoshop for 100 years. Somewhere in there, there's a place where you can straighten keystoning and that kind of thing. And there is a place where you can correct cyan and magenta tones. Or there used to be. I haven't done it in a long time.
There's also a checkbox in Lightroom Classic for that as well.
Okay.
In your
yeah,
optics as well.
they've moved most of the good tools in Photoshop that we use. Lightroom can now do almost all of
Yeah.
them.
I wonder if this was shot through a bus window.
Oh, yeah, it looks like it was. And that
Maybe
could
that's what-
cause it, but the other thing is, so you said something about I was wondering if it was a black and white image. That's a comment I want to make. When you convert something to black and white, always bring up your hue and saturation tool and slide your saturation slider all the way to the right, fully saturated. Because you're still working in an RGB color space, even when you turn the image black and white. And there are some black and white converters that some pixels, I don't know whether pixels don't get, I don't know what the physics of it is, but you can get color in a black and white image that you converted to black and white. So when I do black and whites, the very last thing I do is I bring up my hue and saturation layer and I desaturate the image, even if it doesn't look like it has color in it, because you'd be surprised how many black and white images have actual color in it. So always desaturate a black and white image at the very last thing. And I used to know the physics behind it, but I can't remember. It's been too long. What else do we need to talk about?
This was really fun and really useful. Thank you.
I just want to know why I wasn't invited.
Thank you very much. It was great.
This is very
Well-
helpful. Thank you.
We have a little, not a lottery, but if you're a member, you can have a shot at getting on the trip.
And speaking of that, everyone keep an eye on your email because we'll be announcing the details for the 2026 Yellowstone trip fairly soon. So
Well, it looks like a great time.
Thank you so much.
I think you go just a tad longer. Does anyone have any questions about other things other than composition about their image that they want feedback on before I leave?
I just have one question for you, and maybe you know the answer to this. Are you allowed to flip an image that's being entered into a competition or not?
Yeah.
You are.
Yeah, but as I said, you know, if you're photographing a well-known building or landmark, or a building that has words, or a boat that has numbers and names on it, stuff like that, you've got to be really careful that you don't mistakenly forget that it has words that have to be addressed when you flip it. And like, you know, I mean, I'd never go and flip Half Dome and enter it into a competition, or Pier Number 1 in Rockport, Massachusetts, or the Golden Gate Bridge from a certain perspective, or, you know, things that are places that people go and see. And if it's a local competition and it's a local landmark, don't flip it. It's always going to look not quite right to the people viewing it if they know the place.
Chris, in one of those images of the bison on the road, there was a red pole, and you suggested removing the color. I don't typically enter competitions, but if you were in a nature competition, would that be kosher? Could you remove the color? And if you didn't remove the pole, then you wouldn't be removing anything from the image. But
Yeah, you have to be, for nature images, if you're entering nature competitions, you really have to read the rules, because some nature competitions don't let you remove things, and some do not let you have any evidence of the hand of man. And so in a competition where you can't have the hand of man there, you know, that pole might, you know,
disqualify you.
so you have to understand the competition you're entering. If it's a nature, you know,
Okay.
Could you make
association.
something like that pole? I mean, could you darken it so much that you don't notice it?
I'm
Is
sorry,
that-
can you say that again?
She's asking if you darken it so much that you didn't notice it, would that be allowed, I guess? Is that what your question is?
Yeah.
No, yeah, if you did, maybe it would just look like a stick in the ground. You know, yeah, you can fix things like that. You can heal them. You could desaturate it. There are lots of ways to address it, but I just pointed it out because your leading line led to that particular pole,
Yes,
and it's
Well,
red.
the light of the snowmobile that was behind the buffaloes too.
Yeah, I would have filmed out the snowmobile.
Yeah, I mean, it did make it look like his butt was on fire, and I don't think you want that.
Yeah, well, that was my shot, and I don't know post-processing very much, so I did post-process that image very much. I didn't know how to do some of that stuff. I will go back and learn it.
All right. Well, if that's it, we'll wrap up. Thanks again, Chris. That was a great
thank
job.
you.
Yeah.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Chris. Enjoyed the comments. And
Well-
you take time in doing it for.
I really do enjoy it, and I get to see really great images that I normally wouldn't see. So I may have misnamed animals or whatever, but none of most of these don't grow in my part of the country. I mean, we do have some coyotes, but we hardly ever see them. You know, there are some things that have been reintroduced in the western part of the state, but we never get to see them around here.
Well, we're having a lot of sightings of the pygmy owls this year.
And where's that?
So here in Wyoming, yeah.
Oh, in Wyoming. Okay.
Yeah,
I
it's
couldn't
in-
tell who was talking. I thought maybe Charlotte was telling me that.
Down here in Jackson Hole. And the
That's
way to
pretty-
spot them is you look for a softball sitting on top of a tree.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Cool.
I have a really soft spot for crows. So I loved I don't know if I think that was a raven, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, but I have a really soft spot for them. So I loved seeing that too. Yeah, well, you guys did a really nice job. I mean, especially because you were touring, you know, it's not like you have these blinds where you go out every single week and go out to the same place and, you know, watch the animals and you wait for just the right thing. So for what you were doing, I think the images are really good.
Great. Last chance.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for
Chris.
critiquing.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it.
All right. Everybody have a good day and stay safe out there.
Good night.
Good night.
All right, good night.
Or hanging out generally.